Hello there, Steve Kaufman here, the Linguist on Language Blogs. I haven't done a video in a while. I've been traveling. I was in Europe for a couple of weeks. I got caught there by the ash cloud. As a consequence, I had to drive around from Stockholm to Hamburg, from Hamburg to Vienna. But fortunately, I was able to get back on schedule. I want to talk today about grammar, a subject that comes up from time to time. In this whole discussion of language learning, we have the output versus input debate, and of course, I'm very firmly on the side of input as the place where I like to spend most of my time when I'm learning a language. And that primarily is because I find it effective and yet very easy to organize. Although I must admit now that I've been at my Russian for a while, I find myself wanting to do more with output. I have enough words now. I'm lining up more discussions at LINC with our different Russian tutors. When I get my reports back with my mistakes, I study them and they're fresh in my mind because I've just finished trying to use the language, use it incorrectly. So it comes a point where you definitely have to speak or write more. I'm too lazy to write, but it's good for you. But for a long while, at least in my own case, I'm quite happy to rely on my input activities to absorb the language. Now, how about grammar? Where does that fit in? Now, on my blog, The Linguist on Language, I've suggested that I'd like to do a little poll amongst my readers to find out where everyone stands on this issue. I sort of created two fictitious positions, the grammar lover position, the grammar hater position. Now, love and hate are strong words. The point is, I want to find out where people stand on the importance of grammar in language study, in particular at the beginning. And I think a lot of people, I'm quite surprised actually, a lot of the people who have commented at my blog are very happy with grammar. They like grammar. They like the terminology. They find it challenging, interesting, logical, whatever. I don't. But everyone is different. I'm curious to know what the majority of people believe. I guess first of all, I have my own reaction to grammar, and so I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll talk about what I think are the ways in which we learn language, at least my understanding of how the brain works, and try to justify my somewhat anti-grammar position. And in fact, we may even have a debate over at my blog. I've asked people to come forward and have a debate with me. Vince has come forward, but he doesn't disagree with me that much, so we'll see how strong a debate we have. I like debate. I like disagreement. I think that debate forces us to think about things, to justify our own positions, and also to listen to contrasting positions. Not necessarily with the objective of arriving at an agreement, but simply to stimulate ourselves and to stimulate anyone who's listening. Grammar. First of all, I have this tremendous aversion to unnecessary terminology. In Russian, for example, I still don't understand perfective and imperfective verbs. I understand that the idea of aspect. In other words, that depending on whether something is done regularly or all the time or continuously, or on the other hand, if it's a completed action, you'll have two different forms of the verb. However, I have still a lot of trouble figuring out whether in this particular instance this is a completed action or a continuous action. And trying to do it on the fly while speaking, I find extremely difficult. And I've read explanations, and they make no impact on me whatsoever. Similarly with the cases, there are so many prepositions in Russian that take the genitive for no good reason. I mean, genitive means of something, and yet probably more prepositions take the genitive than any other case. All the explanations make no sense. Some of the explanations, some of the weirdest things are easiest to understand, or at least to remember. Like 1 year takes the nominative, 2, 3, 4 years takes the genitive singular, 5 and more takes the genitive plural. It's weird, but it's kind of straightforward. But there's so many other cases where, or examples of structures that have evolved a certain way in a language, and all of the explanations and rules and terminology don't help much. I learned Japanese and Chinese, and I remember in those books, Great Fix books, De Francis and others, they invented a bunch of new terminology for Chinese and Japanese. I just ignored it. It didn't help me at all. All I needed to know was, this is how they say things in Chinese. This is the pattern. A few examples, not too many references to exceptions, and I'm off. And then I start looking for it, and I see it. And when I see it, I try and pay attention. Much as I do now in LingQ, I will often save phrases that embody the kinds of structures that I have trouble with. And so I don't need, in my own case, I've said that a language is like a jigsaw puzzle, and I just want to get at the jigsaw puzzle, putting the pieces together. And I don't need a manual of instructions on the jigsaw puzzle. There are certain basic concepts, I guess, at the beginning of a language, like this here, the verb comes at the end or at the beginning or whatever, but a lot of even for example, the idea, say in Spanish, that you don't always have to use the personal pronoun. You start to notice that after a while, and I do admit that I will sometimes refer to a grammar book, not so much looking things up, but sort of leafing through it to see if there's anything there that might trigger something, make me more attentive to the language. But I find these terms like modals, gerunds, I don't know, in Korean, as I say, they talk about copulative verbs. All of this terminology I am very, very allergic to. I just resist it. And the explanations, my eyes just glaze over. But a lot of the people who commented at my blog, they love grammar. I think, personally, that our brain works best, and all the reading that I've done suggests that our brain works best at absorbing a lot of input, a lot of experience, stimulus, and gradually forming its own rules. That is more effective than theoretical explanation of the rules. If I see someone doing something, that's more effective than a theoretical explanation of how I should do that. But others, I gather, like grammar. Is it a function of the fact that many of the readers of my blog are linguists in the sense of having studied linguistics? I don't know. I call myself a linguist in the first sense of the word that I find in dictionary definitions, and that is as someone who speaks more than one language. But obviously people who have invested a lot of time and effort into learning a lot of this terminology, once they've learned it, they find it useful to apply to each successive language that they learn. I don't see it. And the idea that grammar is useful whether we like it or not, someone mentioned on my blog. Well, if we don't like it, it's not useful, because when you're learning something, your emotional reaction to what you're learning, whether you like it or not, like whether you like the language or not, whether you like the content or not, whether you like a certain learning strategy or not, all of these things are very subjective, and your emotional reaction to these things will influence how useful these things are. And in my case, I find grammar not so useful. That's not that I haven't tried. I have studied, I have pored over tables, I have tried to understand these explanations of imperfect and perfective verbs. They just don't penetrate my skull. But I do believe that with enough exposure, paying attention, enjoying the language, certain patterns start slowly to become more and more natural. And that's my take on it. You can also read up the recent thread at The Linguist on Language. And thank you for listening. Bye for now.